There's a woman in Ohio who planted one pot of flowers back in 2019. She never replanted it, not once. No trip to the garden center every spring, no seed packets, no April panic buying. That same pot, same container, same soil, refreshed once a year with a scoop of compost, has bloomed every single summer since. Neighbors think she has a secret gardener. She doesn't. She just knows something most people never get taught. Some perennials don't just survive in containers, they come back stronger, fuller, and more established every single year, almost like they're rewarding you for leaving them alone. Meanwhile, millions of people are out there right now, every spring, buying the exact same annual petunias, marigolds, and geraniums over and over again, spending $200, $300, sometimes $500 a year because nobody told them there's a smarter way, a plant once done forever way. That stops today. In this video, I'm giving you 9 lazy perennials that thrive in pots and come back year after year with almost zero maintenance. We're going deep on each one: exact pot sizes, sun requirements, how to protect them over winter, and the mistakes that kill them. And I'll warn you right now, number 7 is the one most American gardeners have never even heard of. And once you see what it does in a container, it's going to change how you think about container gardening completely. Before we get into item number 1, here's why you actually need to subscribe right now, not later. I'm building an entire low-maintenance garden series on this channel, and if you miss the video that's coming right after this one, you're going to miss the exact winter protection method that determines whether these perennials survive their first winter in a pot, because that first winter is where 90% of people lose their plants without ever knowing why. Hit subscribe now so you don't accidentally kill something you didn't have to. 9. Hosta, the shade perennial that gets better with neglect. Hostas are one of the most forgiving perennials you can put in a container, and the reason is simple. Their root system is built to store energy underground, which means even if you forget to water them for a week, they're pulling from reserves you can't see. In a pot that's at least 14 inches wide and deep, a single Hosta division will slowly expand into a full, lush clump within 2 to 3 years. No dividing required, no fertilizing schedule to memorize. What makes hostas genuinely lazy-proof is that they actually prefer being slightly root-bound in a container. Unlike most perennials that sulk when they're cramped, hostas use that pressure to concentrate their energy into thicker, glossier leaves instead of spreading thin. Place them somewhere that gets morning shade or dappled light under a porch or tree, and they'll tolerate almost total neglect for weeks at a time during summer. The surprising fact most people don't know, hostas can survive being frozen solid in their pot over winter, root ball and all, as long as the container itself doesn't crack from the ice expansion. That's why choosing the right pot material matters more than people realize, and that's exactly the mistake that destroys item number 4 if you get the pot wrong. 8. Coral bells, or Heuchera, the perennial that changes color without you doing anything. Coral bells are the plant equivalent of a set-it-and-forget-it slow cooker meal. You plant it once in almost any decent potting mix, and it rewards you with foliage that shifts color across the seasons: deep purples in spring, amber and copper in fall, without a single pruning session or feeding schedule. The reason coral bells thrive so well in containers specifically is their shallow, fibrous root system. Unlike deep-rooted perennials that eventually outgrow small pots and need repotting every year, Heuchera is content in a 10 to 12-inch container for 3 to 4 years straight, before it even needs dividing. It also tolerates both part sun and part shade, which makes it nearly impossible to place wrong on a patio or balcony. Here's the fact almost nobody knows. Coral bells are evergreen in most USDA zones 4 through 9, meaning even in winter, when everything else in your pot arrangement looks dead, Heuchera keeps its structure and color, giving your container a still alive look through the coldest months. But there's one perennial on this list that goes even further than staying alive in winter. It actually gets ready to bloom before the snow is even gone, and it's coming up next. 7. Bergenia, the Pigsqueak, the winter warrior nobody talks about. This is the one I promised would change how you think about container perennials, and here's why. Bergenia is one of the only perennials that actively holds its leathery, cabbage-like leaves through winter, turning deep burgundy in the cold, and then pushes out bright pink or white flower spikes in very early spring, sometimes before the last frost has even cleared. Most American gardeners have simply never been introduced to it because it's more popular in European cottage gardens, but it performs exceptionally well in North American pots. What makes Bergenia lazy in the best way is that it genuinely does better when you ignore it. Overwatering and over-fertilizing are the two things that weaken this plant. It actually prefers slightly dry, slightly poor soil, which means you can skip your watering can for days without consequence. In a container that's at least 12 inches deep with good drainage holes, a single Bergenia will slowly form a dense rosette that spreads sideways year after year, filling out the pot naturally. The surprising fact? Bergenia's nickname is literally Pigsqueak, because when you rub two leaves together, they make a squeaking sound. A fun, weird party trick that also happens to be a quick way to check the leaf is healthy and thick. But if you think surviving winter untouched is impressive, wait until you see the perennial at number 5, because it doesn't just survive being forgotten, it actually multiplies while you forget about it. Sedum, Stonecrop, the drought-proof powerhouse. Sedum might be the single most forgiving perennial on this entire list, and that's saying something. It's a succulent-type perennial, which means it stores water in its thick leaves and stems, so if you go on a 2-week vacation and completely forget your containers exist, sedum will still be sitting there plump and healthy when you get back. This is the plant for people who genuinely admit they're bad at watering. In pots, sedum performs best in full sun with a fast-draining, slightly gritty potting mix. Think of adding a bit of perlite or sand to your regular soil. It needs almost no fertilizer, and in fact, too much feeding actually makes sedum floppy and weak-stemmed. The lazier your care routine, the sturdier and more compact the plant grows, which is the exact opposite of how most perennials behave. Quick pause before we keep going. I want to ask you something. Be honest with me in the comments. How many plants have you personally killed by either overwatering them or just forgetting about them completely? I ask because sedum is basically the redemption plant for that exact mistake, and if you've ever felt embarrassed about your garden, this is your sign that it's not you, it's just that nobody handed you the right plant list yet. And that's exactly why subscribing matters here. I'm covering the exact watering schedule mistakes that kill 6 of these 9 perennials in the next video, and if you don't want to lose the plant you're about to invest in, you'll want to already be subscribed when it goes live. Number 5. Daylily Dwarf Varieties, the perennial that multiplies while you sleep. Dwarf daylilies are true multipliers. Plant one small division in a 12 to 16-inch pot, and within 2 years, that single root clump splits itself into multiple fans, giving you noticeably more blooms every single summer without you dividing, transplanting, or doing anything at all. It's genuinely one of the few perennials where doing nothing produces more flowers, not fewer. Daylilies tolerate an enormous range of conditions, full sun to partial shade, inconsistent watering, average soil, which is exactly why they've earned the nickname the perfect perennial among low-maintenance gardeners. In containers specifically, their tuberous roots store enough energy that even a missed watering week during a heat wave rarely sets them back. The surprising fact, each individual daylily flower only lasts 1 day. That's where the name comes from. But a mature clump produces so many flower buds that you'll see continuous blooms for 4 to 6 weeks straight, even though no single flower survives past sunset. Speaking of surprises, the next perennial on this list is the one budget-conscious gardeners specifically search for, because it solves a problem almost every renter and apartment gardener has. 4. Ornamental Grasses, dwarf fountain grass or blue fescue, the container filler that never needs replacing. If you've ever bought a filler plant for a container arrangement and watched it die by August, Ornamental grasses solve that problem permanently. Varieties like dwarf fountain grass or blue fescue are true perennials that return every year with more volume and texture, adding movement and structure to a pot without a single pruning session required until you do your once-a-year spring cleanup. The key with ornamental grasses in containers is choosing the pot material carefully. This is where the Hosta warning from earlier comes back into play. Terracotta and thin plastic pots can crack when the soil freezes and expands around the root system in winter. A thick-walled resin, fiberglass, or glazed ceramic pot handles freeze-thaw cycles far better and protects the roots underneath. The fact most people miss, you should not cut ornamental grasses back in fall like you would other perennials. Leaving the dried foliage standing through winter actually insulates the crown of the plant from freeze damage, and cutting it back too early is one of the top reasons people lose grasses in pots after their first winter. Wait until late winter or very early spring to cut it down to a few inches, right before new growth starts. Before we go further, drop your city or state in the comments right now. I'm genuinely curious how many climate zones are watching this, because a few of these perennials perform completely differently depending on your winters, and I read every single comment. So tell me where you're gardening from. 3. Catmint, the pollinator magnet that blooms all summer. Catmint is one of the longest blooming perennials you can put in a pot, often flowering from late spring straight through fall with almost no deadheading required. Its soft purple-blue spikes attract bees and butterflies constantly, which means your container becomes a small ecosystem rather than just decoration. In terms of laziness, catmint might be unbeatable. It tolerates poor soil, thrives in full sun, and actually blooms more when you don't fertilize it heavily. If it ever gets leggy midsummer, one quick trim with scissors brings a fresh flush of blooms within 2 weeks. That's the only maintenance this plant asks for all year. The surprising fact, catmint is in the same plant family as regular catnip. And yes, cats are sometimes drawn to it, but the container-friendly ornamental varieties are far less irresistible to cats than true catnip, so your outdoor container is generally safe from being flattened by a neighborhood cat rolling around in it. Let me ask you honestly, have you ever bought the same annual flowers 3 summers in a row without realizing a perennial could have done the exact same job for free after year 1? That's the entire budget philosophy behind this channel. If that hit home even a little, hit that subscribe button now, because the reason connects directly to your wallet. Every video on this channel is built to stop you from rebuying plants you didn't need to rebuy. 2. Lavender, Munstead or Hidcote varieties, the perennial that rewards total neglect. Lavender is proof that some plants genuinely thrive on being ignored. It hates rich soil, hates frequent watering, and hates fertilizer. Everything most people assume plants need is exactly what kills lavender. In a container with sharp drainage and full sun, lavender will come back year after year, getting woodier and more fragrant with age, essentially punishing you for babying it and rewarding you for walking away. The compact varieties, Munstead and Hidcote specifically, are bred to handle container life better than large lavender varieties, staying tidy and full instead of sprawling and woody too quickly. A single plant in a 12-inch pot with gravel or perlite mixed into the soil can produce fragrant blooms for 5 or more years without ever being repotted. The fact almost nobody knows is lavender's fragrance oils are actually concentrated more strongly in dry, stressed commissions, meaning a slightly underwatered lavender plant often smells stronger and more potent than one that's been pampered with regular watering. But even lavender's toughness doesn't compare to the very last plant on this list, because it might be the single hardest perennial in existence to accidentally kill. Quick question before the final item. Out of everything so far, which number has surprised you the most? Type the number in the comments. Just the number, nothing else needed. I genuinely read every single comment, and I want to know which one changed your mind the most. Hens and Chicks, the perennial that's nearly impossible to kill. Hens and chicks earn the top spot because they don't just tolerate neglect, they require it to look their best. This succulent perennial spreads by producing tiny offset chicks around the main hen plant, slowly filling an entire container over a few years completely on its own, with zero help from you. It survives baking heat, drought, poor soil, and freezing winters all in the same small pot, which is why it's historically been grown on rooftops and stone walls in Europe for centuries with no irrigation at all. In a shallow container as small as 6 to 8 inches with gritty, fast-draining soil and full sun, hens and chicks will multiply steadily, filling gaps and covering soil naturally like a living carpet. The surprising fact, the name hens and chicks comes from the way the small offset plants cluster around the mother plant like baby chicks around a hen, and individual hens actually die naturally after they flower once, but not before producing dozens of new chicks to replace themselves, meaning the container population never actually declines, it just continuously renews itself. Here's the pattern connecting all 9 of these plants. And it's the one insight that changes how you'll garden from here forward. Every single perennial on this list gets stronger the less you interfere with it. Hostas prefer being root-bound. Sedum thrives on forgotten watering days. Lavender rewards dry soil. Hens and chicks require neglect to multiply. The lesson isn't just these plants come back every year. It's that most gardening failure isn't caused by doing too little. It's caused by doing too much. Overwatering, over-fertilizing, over-fussing. That's what kills most container gardens, not laziness. Once you understand that, you stop gardening against nature and start gardening with it. And that single mindset shift is worth more than any plant list because it applies to every container you'll ever fill for the rest of your life. If this saved you from buying the same dying annuals for the 5th year in a row, the next video breaks down the exact winter protection method that decides whether these 9 perennials survive their very first cold season in a pot. Miss that one, and you could lose a plant you just spent money on. Subscribe now so it's waiting for you the moment it drops. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Go fill a pot with something that'll still be blooming for you next year and every year after that. I'll see you in the next one.